Okay, hi guys, welcome back to episode 2. And this week we're going to be discussing Hafthor Bjornsson's return to Strongman. So I think if we just kick off with the fact that obviously he attempted to go for the all-time powerlifting raw total world record. Now, it didn't go to plan because he tore his pec. I've got to say, or it's not going to be popular opinion amongst strongman fans, but I was in favor of him going for that because I thought the kind of legacy that it would leave him as a strength athlete if he was able to do it. But it's easy to say in hindsight, of course. I did always have my doubts purely because of the time frame he set himself. I would have loved to have seen him give it 2 years, and I think he'd have had a genuine chance at doing it. As it resulted, he's come back to strongman after this injury. But what were your guys' thoughts on him attempting that powerlifting world record? Marcus?
That was the first time no one went in. I was trying to defer, and Marcus was trying to defer. I agree with you. I think it would have really cemented his legacy, because I think the crack on Hafthor was always he had this thing where he wasn't as statically strong as maybe Eddie or Z, which is kind of silly. But anyways, if he did get it, I think it would have been a nice feather in the cap. But I think he should have. I think that would have kind of always been there. I think easing back into strongman would have been easier for him to build up that strength, and then do a couple shows, maybe not even some big shows, over like 6 months or a year, and then like you said, like 2 years after he's been heavy training again, it might have been better. I think it was definitely too much too soon. And of course, that's easy to say in hindsight, though.
Yeah, I mean, you
Well,
say
yeah,
that.
you say, but in terms of you've got one of Hathor's got one of the best coaches in the world. Seb's a great bloke. He just he says it as it is. I'm pretty sure that they sat down, tried to figure things out in terms of what is possible. Um, Obviously, we know in terms of its application of power is phenomenal when he decides to switch it on. Um, you're right about timescale. I think the moment you draw the line in the sand and that's it, it's categoric. You're setting yourself up a little bit because there is no margin for error. But the problem is the chaotic nature of what strength sports can bring. You just need a slight cold, you need a off day, and all of a sudden that's you derailed. So not to have your head on a swivel for it. Obviously, the manner in which it happened it sucked because do you know what, he was on target, but again the time scale was too short. It's the same as what I've said to a lot of people when you're looking for a pinnacle lift, or you're looking, first you have to, and you've got the perfect background for this, Matt. First you need to leave the atmosphere, then you've got to figure out how to get to the moon. They're two entirely different things. So setting yourself up for that, enjoy your spacecraft with your world domination. Setting yourself up for something like that, it does need time. It needs, if you're coming from powerlifting to strongman, you're going from linear to chaotic then to linear and the other way around. You need a little bit of time. I think the hardest thing to watch with this, he's got a brilliant setup in the way that you could go about this. The idea that the first, and just looking at it from an outsider's perspective in terms of a bigger audience, that maybe not be Team Hathor all the time. And that is that the first little blip in the career of a powerlifter and you're done, where there's powerlifters out there tearing meat from bone, left, right, and centre. He was aligned to a guy, Dan Bell, who is legitimately just an ace bloke, but my God, what a powerlifter, constantly tearing out, but you still compete. You still get your numbers and you still put in. To just dabble a toe in the first time you don't like the temperature just to get back out and then go on to the next, it's the only thing in my mind which is just, if you're going to come in, are you going to be full-blooded? Are you really going to commit? I hope so, because the man's amazing.
Will that injury have a psychological effect carry over into his strongman, do you think? Because Thor was notorious for not getting injured. That was one of the huge things for Thor in strongman. He was incredible at staying injury-free the first time through his first strongman career, as it were. What do you think now? That could play into it?
a little bit of the invincibility goes off. I don't think the pec would be so much of a issue in strongman. He also had that, that foot issue, the 1 year Martins won.
2019 at Bradenton, wasn't it? The plantar.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And of course, Brian just
So
had a chest press at the Shore Classic.
Yeah, you think if Thor could do the Shaw Classic, of course, but yeah, I think he'd be okay with that. It's a little more controlled. Um, I think Thor will be okay with it, but yeah, I could see how that could happen where that kind of like he's always like it's kind of remarkable he never got hurt, honestly, because like his form was never great, like until like he got with Sebastian and started doing it. Like he was so good, but like he was very chaotic. And honestly, even towards the end, his overhead press, like it was almost like you didn't know how he was doing that with like it showed how brute his power was because like there's a lot it's not on the level of someone like Rob Kearney who's he's utilizing every bit of strength he has, where Thor it's like he's doing 200 kilos or more on a log, but like you're like you think he could do like 500 if he like got everything together. So yeah, I think yeah, it shows he's a little human.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean also even his training, but just his schedule. He was doing Games of Thrones on and off all of the time. So all of it led to what you would expect to be many more injuries.
He's built.
Yeah, he did immensely well. The fact that early days as well, if you're ever on set and stuff like that, the food is never going to be up to scratch. You can be doing long hours. The lack of sleep, the lack of consistency in what can go on. There's all sorts of things that could go wrong. It's probably not just okay. There may not have been major injuries, but I'm sure he'd have managed a lot of niggles and issues along the way, and learning his body. And that's it. It's your adaptability as you go forward. Because if you can listen to that, you've got some brilliant heads around him as well. Stefan Solvay Peterson is probably one of my favourite strongmen. It's so capable, and he's a really good guidance on what goes on. You've only got to see the way that he has empathy as well for people like Kim Urak, the guy from Greenland. He sent stones out. So having people like that around him that can can probably arrest problems ahead of time, that's been there and very vocal because they have that tight knit group, is going to be useful to it because you've got strong people that can say back off. The only concern going forward is because Hathor now itself is a brand. He's bigger than just a competed athlete coming in. So are you coming in for the realms of being the sportsman again, the competitive athlete, or are you coming in for notoriety? Are you coming in for what you might be deemed as a legacy marker? If it's the latter, I don't think it's a smart move. If it's like, I really want to get my teeth stuck into this again and get dirty, then I think, then he's going to be a real handful, because Hathor as an athlete, he's tidy, really, really tidy. He's one of the greatest of our generation.
Yeah. If you go back through the years, he was pretty much bang on for top 3 at every competition for years and years. Very, very rarely he finished outside of top 3. Just before we get to that, obviously this is total guesswork, but people were strongly for or against. Do you think if Thor had, let's say, 2 years and had stayed injury-free, so there's a lot of what's, ifs and buts, do you think he had a genuine crack at breaking the world record in the powerlifting? My opinion is yes. Of all kind of freak athletes out there, he's the one guy I believe could come in and challenge someone like Dan Bell. What's your hunch tell you?
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt him. I don't see why not. He's he's an absolute freak. He's a once in a lifetime type of talent as a strength person. Like you look at like you see like in like 2009 or whatever it was when he started competing a little later at Worlds, you just saw him, you're like, what is this? Like he's 6'9" and the 400 pounds from Iceland, and just looked like he's just ready to do anything. Like that was a man that was put on this earth to move heavy things. No one could deny that. Yeah. So and if you look at like his early training, like deadlift was something that he lost points in, and now he holds the world record in it, right? So you look at that, he was able to take, one of his weaker events and hold a world record that people still can't touch. Why? Of course, I'd have faith that he's gonna, be able to break another world record.
It was definitely on the cards in terms of what is possible, because you've got a guy that is almost unlimited. Because you don't, as you say, we're going off the if, buts, and maybes, and you don't know what he's capable of. But at the same time, with whatever else he turned his, he turned his mind to, you saw in terms of how he strung together World's Strongest Man, the Arnolds, the way that he went about his trade was almost unstoppable at one particular point. The only thing that I will counter that with is that, okay, he may have taken it for, I still think he'd have taken it for a second, because I think that it would have brought the best out of someone like Dan Bell. I think he needed that. And even in conversation, just talking along the lines of, what was actually possible for someone like Dan. Dan needed that shot in the arm. Having someone like Hathor step in, also it gives a huge amount of kudos and shines a light on someone that is incredibly special. Dan Bell of his generation is a phenomenal powerlifter, and I genuinely think Hathor coming in, shining a bit of light, and giving him a run for his money, and setting the bar would have got the best out of Dan as well. Because you got to think that lad's a truck fitter, based out in Florida, working in ridiculous heat. He's not professional, but he's still, if given that incentive, okay, Thor could have taken it, but I think Dan Bell would have wrestled it back.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Anyway, so powerlifting's loss is now once again Strongman's gain. Thor's coming back. As I understand it, he is committed to doing the Arnold Strongman Classic and the Rogue Invitational. He has said that he's very open to doing the Shore Classic, but we'll have to see where he's at, because obviously that's a particularly heavy event and it's not priority over to kind of sponsored events. World's Strongest Man, he said for now that he has no plans to do. So let's talk about that first of all, because obviously that's a big statement. Everybody in Strongman does World's Strongest Man, the top guys if they can, but Thor said he's not going to. So how is that going to affect Strongman when you've got the most famous athlete coming back into the sport, but certainly for now, not doing the most famous competition? What are the ramifications of that, do you think?
I think it goes back to what we talked about last week, like how something like Worlds could lose notoriety, like something like Shaw Classic. And I think something like that could really, it definitely puts a little, wrench in the spokes of it, because it says a lot. And, whether it's how you think or not, it highlights all of the issues with a show like World's Strongest Man. Whether you think they're right or wrong or whatever, it brings them up, because it's like, why is he not? There has to be an answer. He said it. And that even if that's just his side of the story, that story is getting broadcast out there, and it's going to be the major talking point of Worlds, especially if he does do something like wins Rogue and the Arnold against the same person that is then competing at Worlds. It brings us right back to the, if so World's Strongest Man days, and, Marius going and getting, fourth or whatever at the Arnold, and Z winning it. But yeah, it definitely, it doesn't help Worlds. And, it's kind of their own doing. Like, it was the biggest missed opportunity I've ever seen. You have the biggest star in the sport. He's on the biggest TV show in the world at the time, and you decide to make him the heel. I've never understood that and never will. That's just from a business and a marketing aspect.
In terms of what's going to happen, you talk about ifs. I came into this early sort of 6-7 years ago. I watched World's Strongest Man from a boy. My love of people like John Paul, Magnus Samuelsson, Yuko Akala, as I sort of grew up, I wasn't aware of the rest of it. I wasn't aware of the politics. And in this instance, even with social media, I think the depth of how all this works we are privileged in what we know. We're privileged in our alignment to certain people and the connections to. But I look at this situation very much like the David Beckham, Alex Ferguson, Manchester United thing back in the day. You had a guy that was a global megastar. You had a club that had history. And the reality is that everything moves on. I think with Hathor, as big as he is as a brand, he's only going to compete for a couple of years. And whilst it might be, it might be back page news in some outlets, it might be back page news for social media, and it might be a talking point within what we do. It will be newspaper by tomorrow. It will just be forgotten. And I wouldn't normally say that for a majority of things, and that's nothing to say about the reach of what Thor is all about. It's just that the reality is you're an athlete. Your mission is one thing and it's over and done with, because there's always another. So as quickly as he will come back into the sport, there will be another talking point. Now, in other competitions, it would be very different. But I think when it comes to Worlds, is what we alluded to last week, in the way that people look at it, view it, and the fact that it is this family entertainment that then is aligned to strength athletes, the way that this will be played out will be very different to a number of other things, because the greater picture, the majority, the scope beyond our bubble, it won't matter.
Yeah. I mean, just as World's Strongest Man is bigger than the sport in terms of the reach it has, Thor also is that. He's bigger than the sport. His name is bigger. Let's say, for example, Thor goes to the Shore Classic. He wins it and is crowned the strongest man on earth. That gets a far bigger reach than just the strongman fans, because it's Thor. At that point, I would imagine people, even more casual viewers of World's Strongest Man, will go, hang on a minute, what about the Mountain from Game of Thrones? He's the strongest man on earth, and he won some competition, yeah?
Yeah, it's not to say the questions aren't going to be asked. It's just that it's not going to run deep enough. It just won't. It's not. We're not in the realms of where you had. Go back to sort of our age group, the Jeff Capes back in the day. The emission of people like Kaz, that was massive. That was absolutely massive. And it was such a focal point for so many people. But the reality is, it took years for us to know the actual depth of it, even though it was the only thing on at the time that was anything like it, and had, the numbers that it used to draw were massive around Christmas time in the UK. But those questions were never asked, only inside and on the periphery of the sport, even though that we all knew Jeff Capes as almost like this superhero. He was on every talk show, every TV show, cereal packets. Yet I just think that certain things, whilst they're talking points and they're going to raise certain questions, I don't think they're going to be around for that long, because the way that this moves, the one thing that we have is connection to so many, and so quickly in this real time, series of events, there's always something else. There will always be another talking point. There will always be another athlete. And once something comes up, there's equilibrium to these things. There will always be something. And I say, it will be a bit shit not to have him there, because he's a brilliant barometer for so many people. And a lot of the athletes are going to be the ones that are missing out, because they want to test themselves against one of the greatest that has ever walked that stage. But the reality is there'll always be the guy that wins it, and he will be the talking point.
Yeah, I think just like we said, last week with IMG and stuff, I think it's a little blip, but they have that long view, the long game. They have the rights. They're like what Marcus is saying. In the grand scheme of things, it's just another thing for us dorks to talk about, but they'll just keep making money.
Yeah, it all comes back to the money and media power that World's Strongest Man have. Yeah.
It's all about the show.
Yeah. Okay. Trying to figure out where Thor will be against this new crop of guys that in many cases he hasn't faced yet. Obviously, Mitchell Hooper primarily being the one. Let's take peak Thor 2018, I would say his peak, but even 19 into 20, he was winning the Arnolds. He was looking incredibly good against Mateus, who was on top form, Martins Lissus. In my opinion, 2018, 2019 Thor was a fair bit ahead of anybody now. Take Tom Stoltman, Mitchell Hooper, these guys right at the top. First of all, is that the way you guys see it? A peak Thor would come in and be ahead of the top guys right now?
Yeah, I think I've said over and over, 2018 Thor, for that period, maybe not the longevity of a Brian Shaw, a Big Z. So you can't say greatest of all time, but in that moment, it's hard to see him. He had a little bit of weaknesses, but he was so dominant in so many ways. Didn't matter the events, didn't matter the show, didn't matter the format. He looked like he was possessed. Like he looked like the Mountain reborn. Like his eyes looked the same as the TV show, no matter the makeup. Like I don't know what was going on, but like there wasn't anything stopping him until he broke his foot. And I don't see past, present, future at this point. I haven't seen anyone that looked that dominant in the sport ever.
5 years is a long time, and that's even if you're competing. The fact that you've been out, and then you look at the other aspects that have changed the sport. The way that Mitchell Hooper has come in is, you've got to tip your hat to the man for the way that he has gone about applying himself, applying common sense and logic to what, if you come from other sports, there's a lot that happens within strength sports, it seems illogical. And there's a lot that could be learned from other sports and brought in. But obviously, you're just listening to big guys, not always through to those with, a career's worth of knowledge. So Mitchell has given a really good indicator to everyone else how they can be professional, how they can raise their game. Is he genetically superior to everyone that's been before? He certainly has brilliant attributes, but he's not from out of this world. He's still human. But what he's done is it gives great kudos to his application and the way he's gone about his trade, because he takes it really bloody seriously, which he should. So that's an indicator to everyone else. They can use that correctly. I'd like to see people take that challenge and say, right, okay, what can I do? How many hundreds of things can I improve by 1%? But even if you take the 2018, 2019 Hathor, how he dealt with the defeat at the time, when Lissus came through, because he was flawless that year. 2019 Bradenton, Lissus in that final was absolutely flawless. Is he going to be able to repeat that? No, I don't think so. I think the body will betray him. But people like Tom coming second and treating that like it was an utter loss, that lad has developed massively. And I'd like to think that Tom will be 5-10% better next time he comes in. Mitchell will not rest on his laurels. I don't think it's going to be easy at all. And I think if there's any cracks in Thor in the first year, they'll be exposed. But it'll give a great indicator of how hungry he is. That's the thing. That's the key. It's not just the body this time. It will be down to the depth, how much this matters, how hungry you are. Because you've basically brought a prize into the cage. And everyone else has got a chance now to take a scalp. So you've handed everyone that's got a bit about them a real incentive. So it's not going to go all your own way.
Yeah. I must say, you talk about Mitchell Hooper's professionalism, the most professional athlete I've seen in person, I haven't met Mitchell Hooper, is Alexei Novikov. That guy would go to like a World's Ultimate Strongman. He went to the training session after all the other athletes who went together. And his warm-up, I'm not kidding you, took almost the length of time the other guys took for their training session. Everything is super serious with him, and that's why he got to where he did at his size, and perhaps unexpectedly for people. That professionalism makes that huge difference, doesn't it, in this sport?
Yeah, and that word is applicable in the way that you deal with things in your own manner. It's just your application thereof, because Mitchell's not following a blueprint as such. He's come in with his own sort of methodologies, and you know what, they're paying off, the alignment to others as well, and what they're sort of bringing in. But you're right, the likes of Alexei, there are people that have come in and they've set their stall out to do things their way. You've even got the other Ukrainian lad in terms of Pavlo Kordiaka. You know, you've got a guy that has brought in, again, genuine athleticism. You know, he's a phenomenal person to watch, because long gone are the days that you're walking at sort of like, you know, blobs, you know, guys that looking like they're fired on pasties rather than protein. So there's lots to be learned from inside this sport. But again, it's what works for you and it's how you apply it. And ultimately, the result is based on how many trophies you line up and how well you string performances together.
Yeah. Yeah. And those guys as well, those Eastern Europeans, a lot of them have like Olympic lifters coaching them. I know Pablo, you talked about, he has his coach has a shot put background. There's very technical people that a lot of other guys in the sport just don't seem to have in the UK and America.
No, say one of the best people that I would point people towards, especially the early foundation stages, to look at how professionalism can be applied when you have a job, is someone like Ivar's, in the way that he's put his career together. Mm-hmm. And again, training facility goes all the way back through to that small club of where they have turned out powerlifter after powerlifter, Olympian, you know, weightlifter, strongmen, you know, and you've got longevity as well, and that's the key. That is the key, longevity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a big problem in the US and UK strongman scene where it's like you can only listen to someone if they've accomplished this in the specific sport of strongman that you do. And so much of that comes down to like how someone's built or their genetics. And we all know the best athlete doesn't make the best coach. And it seems like, you know, half Thor, you know, Sebastian's half his size, you know, but he listens to him and he listens to every word he says. You know, these Eastern Europeans, they know there's a coach. There's a long history of this is the coach. They're the smart one. Doesn't matter what they look like. The results speak for themselves. And there's just too much of like the American ego that goes into it sometimes, that, you know, they're like, I mean, I can't tell how many times I've had like people, like I've had, you know, clients I've worked with and they're like, how can you work with him? He's a lightweight. Like, it's just that kind of thing is just so, you know, it's just so in our culture, it's just weird. But yeah, I think they have a, you know, good deal of professionalism. And what Marcus was saying with Thor is, I think that is the biggest key. Is a great point. What his reasoning is, and because he has more to lose than gain right now with this by far. So I think he's coming back because he misses it. He loves this. You remember he did that interview. He said he'd eat shit if it made him, if it helped him better. If he comes back with that attitude, he's going to do great. If he's just looking to make a good YouTube title for his next video and it's going to gain him followers and do that, and you have that like, oh, well, I don't really need this kind of attitude that, you know, you end up having once you don't, that's going to be, it's going to be how we see it. And it's going to be no easy task. Like you said, it's 5 years. Tom Stoltman, you know, Mitchell Hooper, if Martins comes back, these are all very game. Alexi too. They're professional people. It doesn't matter how much of a genetic, you know, giant from Iceland you are.
A very young man reclaim his career this weekend, just gone.
Yeah, Luke.
In a man called Luke Richardson, who, if you think that he's anywhere near done, you know, that's the guy, that's the wolf that you bring in, because if you want to see genuine hunger and want and desire, watch that lad. If that body can hold together, everyone has got a problem.
And you know what? No one in the sport has reminded me so much of a young Big Z as Trey Mitchell. There's a lot of talent around.
Yeah. The depth makes it so you can't rest on your laurels with the depth of the sport now.
Yeah, it sounds like to me you guys are more leaning towards Thor not being fully committed and therefore not finding the success that he did before. Am I right in assuming that?
I think it's going to be hard to ascertain until he's the only one that really knows, truly. And again, it might come down to either a tough event, a possible injury, or something, you know, a niggle. And it's that I would like to think, especially after the powerlifting, because I think there'd be a tiny little sting of pride in him. that's just been like, ah, fuck, I look a bit of an idiot here, because it will be, I wanted that and I can't convey it to the outside world. I think we do take sometimes into the whole, Hathor's team and the home, the home competition bully, the way it's all set up and it's in my gym. You forget what got him there. And you don't get that by being a hometown bully. You get there by having want and desire. So he's got it. It's in him. And you can't cheat that. I'd like to think, and this is the romanticism again, that the moment he's reminded of where he is on that stage again, whatever has gone through his brain to get him to that point, it'll ignite the rest. And what you'll see the next competition is a far more rounded, hungrier animal.
Yeah, I think he has the desire, or he wouldn't do this. I'm just saying that's kind of what we'll see how it goes as far as it. Like, Matt would know. You spent more time one-on-one with Hafthor than Marcus or I have, I'd say. So I think you'd have a little bit more insight there. But I don't think he's one that he doesn't want to do everything all the way. I think he has a lot of pride, and I think he truly loves strength training. I think he did the boxing for a payday, and you saw how committed. Like, he didn't have to commit himself the way to actually try to become a boxer as much as he did to get that payday. But he's, from what I can tell, he seems like he did not enjoy doing that, but he still did it.
Yeah.
He loves lifting heavy weights.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is the difference, even with the powerlifting, I think, to a degree. I think strongman is his genuine passion.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I believe he'll be fully motivated. What the unknown is what his body will allow him to do this time round. The way I see it, Thor at 90% of where he was when he retired would be enough to come back and win the big competitions again. But of course, time's going to tell. We're going to see.
Yeah, just getting old sucks.
Yeah, I mean, look, Thor's 34. He'd be turning like 35, I think, when he does the Arnold. So all these guys, Mitchell and Tom, in their 20s, Alexei. So he's suddenly like the old man of the sport from all those years, being the young guy but behind Brian and Z. It's funny how quickly these things change, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of strongman years. People forget that too. They look at people like Mark Felix, who got in the sport when he was 37 or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The strongman years, those are like dog years. They age you.
Yeah. Let's just cover a topic quickly, get your guys' thoughts, because people are always going to talk about it. I think Time's a great healer, and I think a lot of the rift between him and Eddie in terms of the fans has passed. I feel like now there's a lot of excitement about him returning, whereas before, when all that was going on, it had been really kind of down the line. But I've seen much more positivity this time. So I think that's a great thing. And obviously there is that split with World's Strongest Man, but then Eddie, of course, is great friends with Brian, and Thor said he's absolutely open to doing the Shore Classic. And I know Brian has also said that he'd be pleased to see Thor there. So I think there's a lot of positivity for the sport in terms of that. But let's get one question out the way. Do you recognize Thor's deadlift of 501 as the strongman deadlift world record? Personally, I do.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a lot of marketing towards it not, but I think it's as legitimate as any other world record, and none of the other ones get brought up. That the same people that criticize the one accomplish themselves. So what are we doing?
In terms of, unless there's something specific that says you can't pull that weight in a specific way or an arena, ultimately, we've just talked about what Hathor is. Competitive animal, lays it all on the line. He is not going to stand there, put his body through what he put it through, the same as what he did for boxing, to know that he's pulled less, to cheat it anyway. The man's absolutely straight as a fucking arrow. And let's be completely honest, he did that as an FU because he could have pulled more. Every person in this room and everyone watching that saw the size of the man, the intent and what he put himself through to prove a point would know that he could have pulled more on the day. He did that just to... So in terms of does it have the gravity of what the showcase of what Eddie did? No, but also Eddie also he was the first one into space, and it'll always get that because he changed the absolute atmosphere around everyone else. You know, it's like walking out and saying, I'm going to run 100 in 8 seconds. You know, you defy logic, and that's what he did. So you can't take that away. But did Thor beat the weight? Yeah, he did. And he beat gravity.
Yeah. And you know what Thor said to me? He was so close to taking that 501 for a double. So close. And he says that he's 100% in his mind he could have done it. And I mean, so yeah, and we mustn't forget he has the elephant bar deadlift world record as well. Obviously, that one gets kind of not talked about so much, but there it is. And during World's Strongest Man this year, JF Caron and I did an interview, and JF talked about in China when they did the obscure competitions where they were kind of stacked almost like on a pyramid. And he said he remembered Thor just kind of throwing up a washing machine. And he remembered that point was the moment he thought, this is the most incredible strongman athlete I've ever seen, because this is exactly what strongman is all about. Weird objects in weird angles, and Thor could do it all, which other people couldn't. And I think
and a disregard for what seems logical.
Yeah. All right, guys, I think we'll leave it there. It's great news Thor's coming back. Thanks so much for both your opinions, and we'll see you again next week for episode number 3.
Thank you.